The North Sea was a ravenous beast, and Finn's lighthouse was the lonely bone it gnawed upon. For 3 days, the storm had thrown itself against a granite tower, the wind shrieking like a banshee, the waves exploding against the rocks below in a fury of white foam. From his perch in the lamp room, Finn watched the relentless assault, the rhythmic sweep of the colossal beam his only response. The light cut through the maelstrom, a steady pulsing heartbeat in the heart of chaos. But for Finn, it was a ghost. It was the same light that had failed to save the sea serpent and its crew of 6, his crew, 10 years ago. He was the only survivor, a fact that had marooned him on this rock far more effectively than any shipwreck. He was the keeper of the light he no longer trusted, a warden of his own guilt. The storm wasn't just outside. It raged within him, its winds carrying the phantom shouts of the shipmates, its waves crashing with the memory of splintering wood and icy water. He moved through his duties with the precision of a machine, polishing the lens, checking the fuel, logging the weather, each task a ritual to keep the memories at bay. Solitude was his penance, the rhythmic sweep of the light his silent, unending confession. He didn't live here, he was haunting the place. On the 4th morning, the beast retreated. The wind died to a mournful sigh, and the sea, exhausted, lay in a sulking gray swell. The dawn revealed a coastline brutalized, littered with seaweed, driftwood, and the detritus of the ocean's rage. Finn began his customary damage check, his boots crunching on a shoreline of debris. It was then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the gulls or the sea. It was a high-pitched, desolate cry, thin and fragile against the immense silence. He followed the sound to a tangled nest of fishing nets and splintered crates washed into a rocky cove. There, half hidden, was a seal pup. It couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, its silver-gray fur matted with sand and something darker. A deep gash marred one of its rear flippers, and its large black eyes were wide with terror and pain. It cried out again, a sound of pure, helpless abandonment. Finn froze. His first instinct, honed by years of self-imposed detachment, was to turn away. The sea gives, and the sea takes. It was the brutal law of this place, a law he had learned in the most unforgiving way. To interfere was to invite connection, to invite hope. And hope was a dangerous tide that could drown a man faster than any wave. He took a step back, his heart a cold, hard stone in his chest. But the pup whimpered, a sound so achingly vulnerable it slipped through the cracks in his fortress of grief. It was the sound of something that wanted to live. He couldn't walk away. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of a decade, Finn carefully untangled the pup from the netting. It snapped weakly at him, a flicker of wild defiance, but it was too weak to resist. He cradled its small, trembling body in his thick keeper's jacket and carried it back to the lighthouse. He couldn't bring it into his living quarters. It was a wild thing. Instead, he cleared a space in the dry, stone-walled supply room at the base of the tower, laying down old blankets to create a makeshift sanctuary. He named it Echo. The name came to him unbidden because the pup's cries seemed to reverberate in the hollow spaces inside him, just like the voices from the sea serpent. The first few days were a fragile dance of mistrust. Finn, a man more comfortable with brass machinery than living creatures, felt clumsy and inept. He researched seal pup care in a tattered wildlife manual he found on a shelf. He learned that the pup was likely dehydrated and starving. He managed to gently clean the gash on its flipper with antiseptic from his own first aid kit, a task that earned him a series of fearful barks. Getting it to eat was the real battle. He tried offering it mashed fish, as the book suggested, but Echo refused, turning its head away, its dark eyes filled with a deep primal grief for its lost mother. Finn felt a painful kinship with the small creature. He too was lost, refusing the sustenance the world offered. So he just sat with it, for hours on end, in the quiet, cool room. He didn't try to touch it. He just spoke, his voice low and raspy from disuse. He told Echo about the light, the tides, and the constellations, filling the silence not for the pup, but for himself. One evening, as another gray dusk settled over the sea, Finn felt the familiar tide of despair begin to rise. The ghosts were particularly loud tonight. He sat on the cold floor of the supply room, the lantern casting long, dancing shadows. Echo lay a few feet away, listless. "I should have been faster," Finn whispered into the gloom, the words tasting like rust. He wasn't talking to the seal anymore. He was confessing to the stone walls. The storm came up so quick, the light wasn't enough to guide us through the reef. I saw their faces. His voice broke. I was the only one who washed ashore. He buried his face in his hands, a dry, racking sob shaking his entire body. He hadn't cried in 10 years. In the depths of his sorrow, he felt a tentative, wet nudge against his hand. He looked down. Echo had dragged itself closer, its large, liquid eyes fixed on him. It nudged them again, a soft, inquisitive touch. It was not a gesture of pity, but of pure, simple presence. A connection. In that moment, something within Finn's frozen heart cracked. He reached out a trembling hand and, for the first time, stroked the pup's head. Echo didn't flinch. It leaned into his touch, and together they sat in the gathering dark, two survivors finding solace in a shared silence. Later that night, for the first time, Echo ate the fish Finn offered. Weeks turned into a month. Under Finn's care, Echo thrived. Its wound healed into a faint silver scar, its coat became sleek, and it grew strong and playful. The supply room was no longer a clinic, but a nursery, and the lighthouse was no longer a prison, but a home. The pup's presence had chased the ghosts from the corners. Finn found himself smiling, a foreign sensation that made his face ache. He had saved Echo, but the small creature had, in turn, saved him from the wreckage of his past. He knew it couldn't last. The day came when the sea was calm, the sun warm, and the tide gentle. It was time. With a heavy heart, he carried the healthy, wriggling seal to the water's edge. He set it down on the wet rocks. Echo looked at him, then at the vast, shimmering water, a world it had almost forgotten. It hesitated, giving a small bark, as if asking a question. "Go on," Finn said, his voice thick. "It's where you belong." Echo looked at him one last time, a long, deep gaze that Finn would never forget. Then, with a graceful slip, it dove into the waves. It surfaced once, farther out, before disappearing into the blue expanse. Finn stood there for a long time, watching the spot where it had vanished. There was no sadness, only a profound sense of peace. That evening, as he climbed the winding stairs to light the lamp, the beam that swept across the sea no longer felt like a ghost or a confession. It was a beacon, a promise, a light of hope.